Hi friends, host Eric here. I've got an announcement, quick announcement, and then I've got a topic I want to discuss, and it's the watchmakers fallacy in conjunction with our understanding of systems and policy. But before we get to that, I do want to make a quick announcement for all of those of you who are joining me this year in the International Marmalade Appreciation Symposium. I do want to remind you there's only one fruit allowed, orange, okay? Orange marmalade, right? Last year, Betty, you used grapefruit, and it was hidden way down on the bottom of the ingredient list. We're lucky we caught you. You're lucky you didn't get disqualified. And I don't want to go revisit old things, but, well, you'll notice Mary's not here this year. And I suspect it's because I called her out last year successfully, I hope. Although she took the prize home, I couldn't prove it, but I tasted tangerine in there a little bit. I can tell. So please, for those of you who are joining, oranges only. Only. No, not just a squeeze of Meyer lemon. No. All right. So, no questions about the marmalade? Okay, good. Let's move on. I was thinking in the shower the other day, yesterday, about the fact that our understanding of politics and policy in the contemporary world is marred by a systemic watchmaker's fallacy. So, what do I mean by this? Well, we've got problems of measurement and we've got problems of metric. Problems of measurement are when we go to engage in some sort of public policy that's expected to achieve a certain outcome. We assume a lot of causal relationships that aren't necessarily in place. We assume deterrence, for example. Well, this law is going to deter people because it's going to punish them if they break the law. It may or may not. It may deter only in certain circumstances, and yada yada yada. We don't usually measure the harms of enforcement, right? But much more importantly is the metric defines the results. So there are a lot of costs to any legislation in terms of individual impacts to individual lives, in terms of impacts to taxation, in terms of minor little impacts that nobody could possibly anticipate or maybe don't even matter. But how broad a net we cast looking for impact from a piece of public policy is going to more or less define the results we get. Now, this is only true for systems that are both open and dynamic. That's most of public policy, but not all of it. So an example of a system that's not open and dynamic are the roads. It's a closed system in the sense that it has a finite set of rules and you can learn them all. It has a finite set of justifications for pulling you over, stuff like that, right? Those closed system impacts are more likely to be at least sort of accurate. In other words, we keep having nightmarish traffic problems at this intersection. Well, let's put in a stop sign. It'll probably help. Or a stoplight. Well, yeah, it probably will help, right? It's simply a way of indicating who goes when, an ordering system. Of course, some people won't, by virtue of the gentleman's honor, obey the ordering system. They'll cut line or just not stop at all, maybe. Well, that's true. So in that closed system, you may be able to get some impacts from the existing status quo system. Of course, the real question is, if we didn't have the punishments, but we only had liability, what sort of difficulties would we have on the roads? We would still have some that may need punitive laws like this that we currently have, but I would suggest that liability would take care of almost everything that the deterrence of tickets takes care of. And with a mandatory insurance program, it would seem to me that there's no real need for tickets to cost anything anyway. If they want to use them to justify taking away your driver's license or something, that's a different matter, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to pay a fine. Okay, so, I mean, it is a revenue generator, but that's all, basically, realistically, when you look at the system and you look at the nature of things in reality. So then we have this other issue with framing. What do we frame as problems and how do we frame them? What do we frame as outcomes? How do we frame them? And what do we frame? How much framing do we spend on the system? So one thing you'll note is that people frame problems as we can't allow this to happen in our great country, kind of a thing, right? It assumes that action can be taken that will address the problem. It assumes that government is the right agency to take action. And it assumes it applies this sort of closed non-dynamic system logic to everything, regardless of whether it's an open dynamic system or not. An open dynamic system is one that both actions within the system can change the rules of the system. So it doesn't matter how many people make U-turn at the no U-turn sign. That doesn't prompt them to take the no U-turn sign down. That might prompt them to write a bunch more tickets there to make sure people stop doing it, right? In that sense, it's a closed system, and that your behavior doesn't impact the system. It's designed to impact the system as little as possible. So if you get pulled over, there's not really anything you can say to tell the cop, don't give me a ticket because this is unjust. You got to have something original because they've got answers to everything that's been tried before. You got to have something brand new. So they frame problems in general. Politicians do. Government spokespeople do. They frame problems as things that are deal withable in the same way that traffic problems, in theory, are deal withable. They frame outcomes. Well, there's a lot of predicted outcomes. Whenever you're advocating in favor of a given piece of policy, almost always it's predicted outcomes. Whether those predicted outcomes actually come true, even if they do, again, you get back to your measurement problems. Okay, well, maybe since the strict drunk driving laws, there have been, 40 fewer drunk driving accidents this year or something. However, there have been 7,000 people incarcerated, yada, 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 yada. Is that actually a utilitarian good that's being accomplished? If you're saying, well, we have to keep these people off the road because they might crash and kill somebody. Well, if they do crash and kill somebody, then they're criminally liable for that. The notion of preventing harms by doing harms, and doing harms to people who haven't done any harm themselves, but have simply done something unsafe or unwise, that's a really slippery slope. That's some really tricky business there. When you start walking down that road, no longer is public policy constrained by any kind of limiting principle. You're not a principled person. You're not arguing, these are my principles, these are how I'm going to apply them. You're saying, well, my principles shift and vary according to what I want. All right. So a big problem then is this systems misidentification and a failure to even understand that there are different kinds of systems. So the three things I think that we really need to factor in when we're talking about policy is, number one, what kind of system are we talking about? If you're talking about wealth inequality, something like that, it's an open system and it's dynamic. Your public policy is not going to work ever, and it hasn't ever, and it's disastrously bad always. Right now, 40% of the economy is being sapped every month on the notion that people can't make their own retirement decisions. And with the reality that the money being taken now will never get paid back for retirement. It's awful. It saps the American economy by 33% I say 40 because there are additional stuff like that, withholdings that aren't taxes exactly, that money just taken straight out of the economy and thrown away. You might argue that, well, the elderly, they need their Social Security, right? Well, I mean, my answer to that is the same as it always is, which is if everybody in their family suddenly had 33% bigger paychecks, can't we figure out a way to take care of our own old people and let other people take care of their own old people? I'm not going to let my parents go out in the street or anything like that. And I mean, I'm more at risk for that than they are. But regardless, it wouldn't matter how little I had, I'd find a place for my folks, right? Now, I do understand there are people with serious medical conditions and stuff, and the healthcare issue is another issue. I don't want to quite get into that one. But the point is, when we talk about equality, for example, we have to understand that that system is open and dynamic. It can be changed. Actions within the system change the system and change the rules of the system. And the system is never the same later than it was before. So whatever actions you're taking, causal link change you're trying to establish in your policy, are doomed to fail. You're committing a watchmaker's fallacy. Yes, the American economy is very complicated. Isn't it amazing the government is so on top of shit that all the different stores get all the supplies they need when they need them? The government must have such detailed lists of schedules and stuff to tell all the different companies when to go to which company and how to do this stuff, and it's amazing. Oh wait, you mean the American economy is not centrally organized? You mean nobody's telling that company when to reorder? But how do they know? Well, it's a chaotic system. It's manifest of individual agents expressing their agency within an open and dynamic system to achieve individual goals. The fact that some individuals fail to achieve adequate goals to make the rest of us who are more goal achieving feel okay about the inequality we witness, it's a tragedy, and it's also something that we cannot fix because they are the owner of their own will, their own body, and their own state of being. To the extent that those individuals who are destitute, homeless, have drug problems, alcohol problems, to the extent that they wish to manifest and choose to manifest a less destitute life, it requires them to commit to quitting drugs and alcohol. And they got to do it. And there's no government plan, no money to help, no doctors, no nurses. All that shit hurts. All of it does is it says somehow you can continue not being responsible for your own life. You can continue not being responsible for your decisions. As a recovering alcoholic, somebody who drank super heavily, I had to quit it. I haven't touched it in almost 3 years. Prior to that, I was a meth addict. When shit got real squirrely towards the end, I had to quit it. Well, not everybody can, Eric. Okay. And if they can't, then you sure as hell can't. And we sure as hell can't. There's no way that shit gets done by anybody but the person themselves. Are there genuine mental health issues? Sure. Do we need some sort of mental health funding system to take care of mentally ill people? I don't know. I'd love to see it super localized, whatever it is. The bottom line is you can't centrally manage chaotic, open, dynamic systems. All you do is create cancer. You create cancer in the system. So, the point of this video is understanding policy requires us to understand what kind of systems we're looking at. It requires us to understand the extent to which the predicted outcomes are being used to justify violations of principle. We have to incorporate a principle in the decision making, right? So we have to understand what our principles are. Are we people of character? Do we have principles? Well, what are they? If you ask politicians, they have no idea. They'll tell you stuff that aren't principles. Things like, well, everyone should be blah, blah. That's not a principle, that's a wish. Principle is a limiter. It's what you won't do. It's what you won't do that matters, not what you will do. Anybody can walk the road to hell, stepping on nothing but good intentions the whole way, and end up with a genocide at their feet. Some people might insist that the drug war was well intentioned. I'm not going to dispute that it was not. It wasn't explicitly put there as a means of oppressing black people, which is commonly thought to be the case. It was an example of cognitive failure on the part of policymakers that persisted to this day. A failure to understand the nature of systems. War on poverty. Trillions of dollars thrown at it. Poverty rate unchanged. War on drugs. Trillions of dollars thrown at it. Drug use. Drug use rate unchanged. Millions of lives ruined. I mean, the thing is, I want to see those drug warriors. I want to see the DEA agents and stuff. I want to see them in prison. I want to see them hung. I want to see them suffer. They have chosen a job. They and prosecutors alike have chosen a job where they convert individual human lives into their own career gain, paying no attention whatsoever to issues of justice, only to issues of law, and only then, insofar as those issues of law support what they want to do anyway. That's reality. That's the reality of most law enforcement and prosecutorial behaviors. Not all of it, but most of it. So when you see a prosecutor especially, walk right up to that prosecutor and say, "Sir or madam, you are a loathsome piece of shit. You think that other people's lives are just there for you to make fungible and turn into your own advancement and wealth. I sure hope you die in a really torturously painful way. Have a good day." It's the best thing you can do. Anytime you see a prosecutor, make it clear to them that you know what they are, and you intend to scrape it off the bottom of your shoe. Thanks for watching Talking with Fat People. And don't forget to eat plenty, plenty and plenty more. Several pounds, a ton or four of that most delightful dairy product in history. Yes, cheese.